with the prayers. Om Agyantimirandasya Jnananjana Salakaya Chakshunmilitam Yena Tasmai Sri Guruve Namah. Shri Chaitanya Manobhishtam Sthapitam Yena Bhutale Swayam Rupamayam Dadati Sapadantikam. Vandeham Shri Guruho Shriuta Padagamulam Shri Guru Vaishnavamsya Shri Rupam Sagrajatam Sahagana Raghunatham Vitam Tam Sajivam Sadvitam Savadutam Parjana Saitam Krishna Chaitanya Devam Shri Radha Krishna Padan Sagana Lalita Shri Vishakam Vitamsa Namo Vishnu Padaya Krishna Peshaya Bhutale Srimate Bhaktivedanta Swami Niti Namne Namaste Saraswate Deve Gauravani Prasarine Nirvishesha Shunvadi Pasate Desatarine Vancha Kalpadruvasya Kripa Sindhuve Patitanam Pavane Vaishnavyo Namo Namah Namo Mahavadanyaya Krishna Prem Pradayate Krishnaya Krishna Chaitanya Namne Gaurtase Namah हे कृष्णा करुणा सिंधु दीनबंधु जगतपते गोपसा गोपिका कांता राधा कांता नमस्ते तप्त कांचन गौरांगी श्री राधे वृंदावनेश्वरी विश्वानुसुते देवी प्रणमामि हरिप्रिये वीराचार्य निवासाय नित्याय परमात्मने बलभद्र सुभद्राभ्याम जगन्नाथाय नमः जय श्री कृष्ण चैतन्य प्रभु नित्यानंद श्री अद्वैत गदाधर शिवासादि गौर भक्तवृंद हरे कृष्ण 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 हरे 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 राम राम राम। So, Rukmini Harishavani Mataji, can you share that document with the devotees?
Okay.
So my laptop is having that permanent problem. It's difficult to share.
दाल बनेगी मेरे लिए। क्या बात है, टाइम क्या हुआ है देखो जरा।
Actually, we were discussing 3.6 na? 3.6 was complete? Not complete na? I think last this was remaining for 3.6. Last section was remaining. So just so that Varnas we had done. I think we are supposed to from 35, 3.6 to 135. So
Is my screen visible, Prabhuji?
no.
No.
At least not to me. I don't know about the other devotees.
It's visible to us. We
Okay,
can
it's
see
visible
it.
to you. Okay, then it's just better explain. It is visible to all of you. And I can see on my laptop. Yeah, so somebody can read 35th translation.
O Vidura, who can estimate or measure the transcendental time, work, and potency of the gigantic form manifested by the internal potency of the Supreme Personality of Godhead?
So after speaking about or answering the questions of Vidura, Maitreya Muni is like very truthful. So what he's saying is, what I have explained is like something which I can perceive and understand. But as far as Lord's Leela of creating this world is concerned, it is unlimited. And that is why we will find sometimes some other scriptures give some different of description, because there not every aspect can be explained or covered in anything. It's like a okay. Understanding the cart is something which I heard from I forgot the name of Maharaj. Krishna Chaitanya Swami Maharaj, yes. So he's considered one of the greatest scholars of ISKCON today. He writes a lot of books in Oxford. Rupa disciple. So he gives a very good example. He says that trying to understand about Lord just by reading scriptures, it's like trying to understand about the whole cart just by seeing the marks of the wheel of the cart. So just by seeing the marks of the wheel of the cart, how much can we estimate about the cart? So similarly, we can understand everything. So there are a lot of aspects which are included in the creation. And then very honestly, Maitri Muni says, to understand the internal potential of the law, how it works, fully is impossible. But still, why did he explain? If I can't understand, then why should I explain? Like sometimes one speaker I remember, it was a very big temple. So he was like telling that, no, actually I'm unqualified. I don't know anything about Bhagavatam. I'm very fallen. So then a person from the audience says that why are you sitting and speaking? Get down from the Vyasasan. He was a new man. So then this is the answer. Answer is given in text number 36. Yet why still a person should speak Bhagavatam? So you can repeat this verse after me. Tathapi kirtayami anga
तथापि कीर्तयाम्यङ्गा
yatha mati yatha srutam
यथा मति यथा श्रुतम्
kirtim hare swam satkartum
कीर्तिं हरे स्वां सत्कर्तुम्
giram anyabhidasatim.
गिरम् अन्याभिधासितम्.
Please read translation and the purport.
In spite of my inability, whatever I have been able to hear from the spiritual master and whatever I could assimilate, I am now describing in glorification of the Lord by pure speech, for otherwise my power of speaking would remain unchaste. Purport. The purification of the conditioned soul necessitates purification of his consciousness. By the presence of consciousness, the presence of the transcendental soul is verified, and as soon as consciousness leaves the body, the material body is not active. Consciousness is perceived, therefore, by activities. The theory put forward by empiric philosophers that consciousness can remain in an inactive state is the proof of their poor fund of knowledge. One should not become unchaste by stopping the activities of pure consciousness. If the activities of pure consciousness are stopped, certainly the conscious living force will be otherwise engaged, because unless engaged, the consciousness has no standing. Consciousness cannot be silent even for a moment. When the body does not act, the consciousness acts in the form of dreams. Unconsciousness is artificial. By induced extraneous help, it remains for a limited period. But when the intoxication of the drug is finished, or when one is awake, the consciousness again acts earnestly. Maitreya's statement is that in order to avoid unchaste conscious activities, he was trying to describe the unlimited glories of the Lord, although he did not have the ability to describe them perfectly. This glorification of the Lord is not a product of research, but the result of hearing submissively from the authority of the spiritual master. It is also not possible to repeat all that one has heard from his spiritual master, but one can narrate as far as possible by one's honest endeavor. It does not matter whether the Lord's glories are fully explained or not. One must attempt to engage one's bodily, mental, and verbal activities in the transcendental glorification of the Lord. Otherwise, such activities will remain unchaste and impure. The existence of the conditioned soul can be purified only by the method of engaging mind and speech in the service of the Lord. The Tridandi sannyasi of the Vaishnava school accepts 3 rods, representing the vow to engage in the service of the Lord with body, mind, and speech, whereas the Ekadandi sannyasi takes the vow to become one with the Supreme. Since the Lord is the Absolute, there is no distinction between him and his glories. The glories of the Lord, as chanted by the Vaishnava sannyasi, are as substantial as the Lord himself, and thus while glorifying the Lord, the devotee becomes one with him in transcendental interest, although he remains eternally a transcendental servitor. This simultaneously one and different position of the devotee makes him eternally purified, and thus his life becomes a complete success.
Hari. So Prabhupada said that because we are very active. So he speaks like, no, this is a very beautiful verse, which tells the reason why we should glorify Krishna. So what he says, yatha mati yatha srutam. So as I have heard from the spiritual master, and to the best of my intelligence, because we all of us have different intellectual capabilities. So now somebody may be very intelligent, I may not be very intelligent. But to the degree I can understand, as I have heard from the spiritual master, I should speak. Kirtim Harim Swam Satkartam. I should speak Harikatha. Why? If I don't speak Harikatha, then this tongue will become asati. Like Sati Nadi or chaste woman is one who is very much faithful to the husband. Similarly, the senses are meant for the master of the senses. Senses are supposed to be engaged in the master of the senses. So, who is the master of the senses? Lord Rishikesh, Lord Krishna. So, Krishna is the master of the senses. So, tongue has to be engaged in Krishna service. But if it doesn't engage in Krishna service, it engages in sense gratification or anything else, then it is called asati, unchaste women. Or it's like an unchaste tongue. So that is why why should we speak Harikatha? So that tongue can be used in the glorification of the Lord, which is actually meant for the glorification of the Lord. So this is the reason. So that's for our purification or real engagement of the tongue. And then he further glorifies this Harikatha. That why should we speak Harikatha? This is another reason, which is explained in text 37. So these all are the verses which glorify the glories of the Lord. Ekanta labham vachaso nupumsam suslok mauler gunavadamahu sutascha vidvat vir upakritayam
Soteshche Vidhavi Vidupakritayam
katha sudayam upasamprayogam.
Katha Sudhaya Uprayogam.
Please read translation as well as the purport.
The translation: the highest perfectional gain of humanity is to engage in discussions of the activities and glories of the pious sector. Such activities are so nicely arranged in writing by the greatly learned sages that the actual purpose of the ear is served just by being near them. But the impersonalists are very much afraid of hearing the activities of the Lord because they think that the happiness derived from the transcendental situation of Brahman is the ultimate goal of life. They think that anybody's activity, even that of the personality of Godhead, is mundane. But the idea of happiness indicated in this verse is different because it relates to the activities of the Supreme Personality, who has transcendental qualities. The word Gunavadam is significant because the qualities of the Lord and his activities and pastimes are the subject matter for discussions of the devotees. A rishi like Maitreya is certainly not interested in discussing anything pertaining to mundane qualities. Yet he says that the highest perfectional stage of transcendental realization is to discuss the Lord's activities. Srila Jeev Goswami therefore concludes that topics regarding the transcendental activities of the Lord are far beyond the transcendental realization of Kaivalya's happiness. These transcendental activities of the Lord are so arranged in writing by the great sages that simply by hearing of those narrations, one becomes perfectly self-realized, and the proper use of the ear and the tongue is also achieved. Srimad Bhagavatam is one such great literature, and the highest perfectional state of life is attained simply by hearing and reciting its contents.
So the previous verse 36 talked about the necessity of engaging our tongue in Harikatha, and this verse talks about the necessity of engaging our ears in Harikatha. So nobody can fully cross over the ocean of Lord's glories. Lord Anand says since unlimited time, has been trying to glorify Supreme Lord, but he is not finished till now. So who can fully glorify Lord? But one becomes successful in his hearing and chanting with some amount of knowledge which he has attained. So ears are meant to hear the nectar of Harikatha. So if somebody is speaking Harikatha, someone else is hearing Harikatha, or nobody is hearing Harikatha. So even if nobody is hearing Harikatha, at least one person is hearing Harikatha, that is who? We ourselves. And that is the reason Bhakti Saraswati would say that if you don't get anyone, preach to the four walls. Preach to the four walls, at least we are hearing when we are speaking. So that's why Harikatha should always continue. So Harinam and Harikatha, they are the greatest nectar in the not only current age of Kali, it's like for all the times. So there's a perfection of ears to hear Harikatha. Okay. So now you can read just next 3 verses translation. 30, 13 and 40. Who's going to read 30, 13 and 40?
The original poet, Brahma, after mature meditation, 1,000 celestial years, would know only that the glories of the Supreme Soul him is unconceivable.
Other 2 verses also.
Mother, yes. The wonderful potency of the Supreme Personality of Godhead is bewildering even to the juggler. That potency is unknown even to the self-sufficient Lord, so it is certainly unknown to others. Words, mind, and ego, with their respective controlling demigods, have failed to achieve success in knowing the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Therefore, we simply have to offer a respectful obeisance unto Him as a matter of same.
Thank you. So after 1,000 years of his matured yoga practice, Brahmaji could understand that he cannot understand the glories of the Lord fully. That was Brahmaji's realization. So what he could understand that he can't understand. So then again, why to try to understand? So that we can purify our intelligence. And that is the perfection of intelligence. So that's why whether in a conditioned state or in a fully realized state, one can never become God. God is God only. So even perfected personalities in the spiritual world, they don't know Krishna. Why? Because those who are living entities are living entities. Those who are energies of the Lord are the energies of the Lord. Like even if somebody is a pure devotee, he can understand Krishna, but not fully, because even Brahma can't understand. No, Lord himself tries to understand his glories, and by the time he understands his glories increase. So that is how that constant competition in Lord's omnipotence and omniscience. So omniscience means fully knowing everything, and omnipotent means having a lot of power. So if Lord is omnipotent, he cannot be omniscient. Nah, because if that means he has a lot of power. So if he has a lot of power, which one cannot understand, then okay, he has a lot of power, but one cannot understand. If he cannot understand, he is not omniscient. And if he's omniscient, he can understand his power. That means power has a limit. So Lord is so powerful. At the same time, he's all-knowing. So he knows what is his power. But by the time he understands his power increases. So that's how Lord himself cannot understand himself fully. So then what to say of others? So that's how what was Brahma's realization. But then Vidura asked a question that one can see many persons who have seen the Lord and who can reveal it to others. So then what happens is such people, They are bewildered by Maya and they think that we know everything about Lord. So when Lord himself doesn't know fully about himself, as we were explaining, then how can others know about the Lord fully? And that is the reason those who actually know, they know that they don't know. So it takes a great amount of knowledge to become humble and understand that we don't know. That's why you must have observed one thing, that new people are very confident. It's like a new person comes, he preaches so boldly, and like full confidence is there, and anything, cut, this and that. But as the years pass, people become humble. they know that they don't know. So that is the Vidya Dadati Vinyam. As one gets knowledge, one becomes very humble because one understands one's insignificance. One understands how insignificant we are. And those who don't have knowledge, they think that no, we know a lot. So that is how ultimately knowledge leads to humility. And that's why he says that I offer respects to Supreme Lord. So no Devakatas such as Brahaspati, Rudra, Chandra, Indra, anybody cannot understand Supreme Lord. So that's how Maitreya offers respect to the Supreme Lord. After speaking about the Supreme Lord, just to tell that fully understanding about Supreme Lord, it's not possible. So that is how this chapter number 6 ends. Yes, Madhuri. Now maybe you can show chapter number 7. Yes, Madhuri, very ready. Yeah. So chapter number 7 is entitled as the further inquiries by Vidura. And first 7 verses that describe about Vidura's inquiry about Ishvara and Jivas. Text number 8 to 14 are how Maitreya dispelled all misconception about Ishvara and Jiva and recommend that bhakti is the ultimate process. Verse 15 to 20, Vidura shared his heartfelt relations with Maitreya. 21 to 38 are Vidura's further inquiries. Here's some questions. And 39 to 42, Vidura declared his confidence in Maitreya. So that is how this chapter goes. Now we'll discuss Vidura's inquiries about Ishvara and Jivas. Yeah. Somebody can read text 1, 2, and 3. This is very philosophical chapter, and we'll learn a lot from this chapter.
Text 1. Sri Shukdev Goswami said, O king, while Maitreya, the great sage, was thus speaking, Vidura, the learned son of Dvaipanya Vyas, expressed a request in a pleasing manner by asking this question. Text 2. Sri Vidur said, O great Brahman, since the Supreme Personality of Godhead is the complete spiritual whole and is unchangeable, how is he connected with the material modes of nature and their activities? If this is his pastime, how do the activities of the unchangeable take place and exhibit qualities without the mode of nature, without the modes of nature?
Yeah.
Text 3. Boys are enthusiastic to play with other boys or with various diversions because they are encouraged by desire. But there is no possibility of such desire for the Lord because he is self-satisfied and detached from everything at all times.
Yeah. So he starts asking question. So the first question is, the Supreme Lord is spiritual and this material world is material. So Lord is called Godatit. He is beyond 3 modes of material nature. So if he is beyond 3 modes of material nature, how can he come in contact with the 3 modes? Because when you create something, let us say if we are creating a maybe something made from mud, some deity made of mud, or some statue made of mud. So then our hands become smeared by mud while we make the statue. But Lord is creating. How is it that he's spiritual and he's connected with the mental modes of nature? How is that possible? And let us say if it is his pastime, then how does that pastime take place? That he is beyond nature and still he performs so many pastimes with the nature by creating the entire cosmos. And then further he says, okay, let us say if it is his play, but generally people play with some desire. There's some desire. But as far as Lord is concerned, he is Atmaram, self-satisfied. So a person who is self-satisfied, how can he get a desire to create so many universes? It's like somebody has a desire to make bungalow with 4 or 5 rooms, nah? Or let us say 10 rooms, and we say, oh, he has so many material desires. But not 1, 2 rooms. He has created so many universes. So if he's self-satisfied, how can he create so many universes? So this is the next question. Please read 4th, 5th, and 5th purport.
Yes, Radha Keshav Prabhuji.
Hanji, text 4. By his self-sheltered potency of 3 modes of material nature, the Lord has cast the creation of this universe. By her, he maintains the creation and conversely dissolves it again and again. Text 5. The pure soul is pure consciousness and is never out of consciousness, either due to circumstances, time, situation, dreams, or other causes. How then does he become engaged in nescience? Purport. The consciousness of living being is always present and never changes under any circumstances, as above mentioned. When a living man moves from one place to another, he is conscious that he has changed his position. He is always present in past, present, and future, like electricity. One can remember incidents from his past and can conjecture about his future also on the basis of his past experience. He never forgets his personal identity, even though he is placed in awkward circumstances. How then can the living entity become forgetful of his real identity as a pure spirit soul and identify with the matter unless influenced by something beyond himself? The conclusion is that the living entity is influenced by the avidya potency as confirmed in both the Vishnu Puran and beginning of Srimad Bhagavatam. The living entity is mentioned in Bhagavad Gita 7.5 as Paraprakriti, and in Vishnu Puran he is mentioned as Parashakti. He is part and parcel of the Supreme Lord as a potency and not as the potent. The potent can exhibit many potencies, but the potency cannot equal the potent at any stage. One potency may be overcome by another potency, but to the potent, all the potencies are under control. The G potency, or the Kshetrajana Shakti of the Lord, has a tendency to be overpowered by the external potency, avidya karma sangya. And in this way, he is placed in the awkward circumstances of material existence. The living entity cannot be forgetful of his real identity unless influenced by the avidya potency. Because the living entity is prone to the influence of avidya potency, he can never equal to the supreme potent. Thank you.
Hari Hari. So in the purport, Prabhupada gives the answer, although Vidura is asking question. So in text 4, his question is that by his self-centered potency, that the material Trigunamayi Maya, the Maya of 3 modes of material nature, so he has caused the creation of this universe. And he maintains the creation by 3 modes and dissolves it again and again. So okay, he does by 3 modes. But that means he should come in contact with 3 modes. Otherwise, how does he do that? And then the next question is that what to say of the Supreme Lord? Even Jiva is beyond He is spiritual. But then he becomes so much entangled in this world. Due to circumstance, time, situation, dreams, etc., nobody can cover the consciousness, because consciousness in the sense of soul. So no matter can cover the soul. Like for example, when Yamdutas take a living entity from one body to another body, they actually catch the subtle body. And then they give him the Yatna Sarir and they take him. But they can't catch the soul. So what actually happens is, soul being attached to the subtle body travels with the subtle body. So he's very attached. And why is he attached? Because he knows I need subtle body to enjoy this world. That is why he goes. So then, so such a soul who's so pure, how can he engage in avidya? How can he engage with essence? So that is another question. So Prabhupada says that it is because of avidya. And because he's being covered means there is something which is covering him beyond himself. He's under some external influence. So using that, Prabhupada disproves the theory that somebody can Supreme Lord. He is Supreme Lord, and how can he be covered with avidya? Not possible. Yeah. Please read 6th and 7th translation.
The Lord, as the super soul, is situated in every living being's heart. Why then do the living entities' activities result in misfortune and misery? Text 7. O great and learned one, my mind is greatly illusioned by the distress of this new science, and I therefore request you to clear it up.
Yeah, so beautiful question. So what he says is, first he has questions regarding Supreme Lord. So Supreme Lord is spiritual, beyond 3 modes of material nature. Then why does he create this world? On top of that, if somebody creates something, one should have desires. But Lord on top of that is Atmaram. He is self-satisfied, fully satisfied. And how did he get a desire to do so much of creation? So that is from the side of Supreme Lord. Now from the side of Jiva, Jiva is spiritual and is beyond 3 modes of material nature. He has nothing to do with 3 modes of material nature. So how does he engage with avidya, which is basically mode of passion and mode of ignorance? How does he become engaged with that? And on top of that, let us say, by some mistake, somehow, he became engaged with avidya, but super soul is standing next to him. And when super soul is standing next to him, how can he allow the living entity to be in such a miserable condition? How can he allow living entity to be in such a misfortune? Because according to the Vedic culture, any misery upon the citizen is the responsibility of the king. King is supposed to be looking at the well-being of the living entities, also of the citizens. So only a bad king would allow the citizens to become unhappy. So how can Supreme Lord, Super Soul, who is standing right next to the living entity, allow him to suffer so much? So how is that possible? So that's like really puzzling, especially in the cases where some people who undergo great injustice or undergo great injustice. For regarding them, it's like very difficult to understand. How can Lord allow that? How can Lord allow living entities to suffer so much? So that was the next question. Okay. Now please read 8th, 9th, and 9th purport.
Text 8 translation. Sri Shukdev Goswami said, O King Maitreya, being thus agitated by the inquisitive Vidura, at first seemed astonished, but then he replied to him without hesitation, since he was fully God conscious. Text 9 translation. Sri Maitreya said, certain conditioned souls put forward their theory that the Supreme Brahm or the personality of Godhead is overcome by illusion or Maya, and at the same time they maintain that he is unconditioned. This is against all logic. Purport. Sometimes it appears that the Supreme Personality of Godhead, who is 100% spiritual, cannot be the cause of the illusory potency which covers the knowledge of the individual soul. But factually, there is no doubt that the illusory external energy is also part and parcel of the Supreme Lord. When Vyasdev realized the Supreme Personality of Godhead, he saw the Lord along with his external potency, which covers the pure knowledge of the individual living entities. Why the external energy acts in this way may be considered as follows, as analyzed by great commentators like Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur and Srila Jiva Goswami. Although the material, illusory energy is distinct from the spiritual energy, it is one of the many energies of the Lord, and thus the material modes of nature, the mode of goodness, etc., are surely qualities of the Lord. The energy and the energetic personality of Godhead are not different, and although such energy is one with the Lord, he is never overpowered by it. Although the living entities are also parts and parcel of the Lord, they are overcome by the material energy. The inconceivable Yogam Aishwaryam of the Lord, as mentioned in Bhagavad Gita 9.5, is misunderstood by the froggish philosophers. In order to support a theory that Narayan, the Lord himself, becomes a Daridra Narayan, poor man, they propose that the material energy overcomes the Supreme Lord. Srila Jiva Goswami and Srila Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur, however, offer a very nice example in explanation. They say that although the sun is all light, the clouds, darkness, and snowfall are all part and parcel of the sun. Without the sun, there is no possibility of the skies being overcast with clouds or darkness, nor can there be snowfall on the earth. Although life is sustained by the sun, life is also disturbed by darkness and snowfall produced by the sun. But it is also a fact that the sun itself is never overcome by darkness, clouds, or snowfall. The sun is far, far away from such disturbances. Only those who have a poor fund of knowledge say that the sun is covered by a cloud or by darkness. Similarly, the Supreme Brahm or the Parabrahm, the personality of Godhead, is always unaffected by the influence of the material energy, although it is one of his energies. Parasa Shaktir Vivadheva Shruyate. There is no reason to assert that the Supreme Brahm is overpowered by the illusory energy. The clouds, darkness, and snowfall can cover only a very insignificant portion of the sun's rays. Similarly, the modes of material nature may react upon the ray-like living entities. It is the misfortune of the living entity, certainly not without reason, that the influence of the material energy acts on his pure consciousness and eternal bliss. This covering up of pure consciousness and eternal bliss is due to avidya, karma, samagya, the energy which acts on the infinitesimal living entities who misuse their minute independence. According to Vishnu Purana, Bhagavad Gita, and all the Vedic literatures, the living entities are generated from the Tathastha energy of the Lord, and thus they are always the energy of the Lord, and are not the energetic. The living entities are like sun's rays. Although explained above, there is no qualitative difference between the sun and its rays. The sun's rays are sometimes overpowered by another energy of the sun, namely by clouds or by snowfall. Similarly, although the living entities are qualitatively one with the supreme energy of the Lord, they have the tendency to be overpowered by the inferior material energy. In the Vedic hymns, it is said that the living entities are like the sparks of a fire. The sparks of fire also are fire, but the burning potency of the sparks is different from that of the original fire. When the sparks fly out of touch with the original fire, they come under the influence of a non-fiery atmosphere. Thus, they maintain the potency to be again one with the fire as sparks, but not as the original fire. The sparks can everlastingly remain within the original fire as its part and parcel. But the moment the sparks become separated from the original fire, their misfortunes and miseries begin. The key conclusion is that the Supreme Lord, who is the original fire, is never overpowered, but the infinitesimal sparks of the fire can become overpowered by the illusory effect of Maya. It is a most ludicrous argument to say that the Supreme Lord is overpowered by his own material energy. The Lord is the master of the material energy, but the living entities are in the conditioned state, controlled by the material energy. That is the version of Bhagavad Gita. The froggish philosophers who put forward the argument that the Supreme Lord is overpowered by the material mode of goodness are themselves illusioned by the same material energy, although they think of themselves as liberated souls. They support the argument by a false and laborious jugglery of words, which is gift of the same illusory energy of the Lord. But the poor froggish philosophers, due to a false sense of knowledge, cannot understand the situation. In the 6th canto, 9th chapter, 34th verse of the Srimad Bhagavatam, it stated, Prabho if tavyam vihara yoga yad ashrano shariraidam anavikshmat samvaya atmavanikare mayena sagun aguna rishi pashi harasi. Thus demigods pray to Supreme Lord that although his activities are very difficult to understand, they can still be understood to some extent by those who sincerely engage in the transcendental loving service of the Lord. The demigods admitted that although the Lord is apart from the material influence or creation, he nevertheless creates, maintains, and annihilates the complete cosmic manifestation by the agency of the demigods.
Thank you. So now we may have heard this particular philosophy which Prabhupada is speaking many times, but really speaking, it's like very remarkable for most of the part of the world. Because the previous texts, the point which Vidura raised, are considered the biggest dilemma for most of the major religions of this world. That when Lord is next to the living entity, how can living entity suffer? And that is why they have this concept of Satan. It's something like Maya for all of us. So they say that Lord cannot be all compassionate, at the same time all powerful. So they say that if Lord is all powerful, he can't allow his children to suffer so much. And if let us say he is all powerful and he's allowing his children to suffer, so then he's not compassionate. So he can be either all compassionate or all powerful. And that's why they came up with this concept of Satan, saying that it is Satan who's trying to cause the trouble to the living entities, to the people, and God is trying to save him. But one day will come when God will defeat the Satan, and then everybody will be happy. So especially when the tsunami came many years ago, it's around 1999 or 2000, something like that. So that time, especially the religions who considered life to be only one life. So for them, there was a small girl who lost his mother, father, and as far as maybe his mother was pregnant or some other relative was pregnant. So then she asked the person highest on the authority of that religion, representing billions of people. So she asked him that, why did I suffer? And especially if you say that people suffer because of their sin, there are many children who were there in the womb of their mother and they were killed. They didn't have even opportunity to perform any activity. So why were they killed? Why did they suffer so much? So then this person said what to do. This was activity of the Satan. But don't worry. One day God will win over Satan and then everything will be all right. But if Satan is so powerful that beyond the will of the Lord, if he can do something, then it might happen that Satan may win over God. Then what will happen to the people of the world? So they have no answer to these questions. So that's why these purports, they're like very powerful. So Prabhupada gives a very beautiful example. So first fact he relates is that as we read that Vyasdev saw Supreme Lord and he saw his Maya behind the Supreme Lord. But this Maya was fully in control of living entities, but Maya was under the control of the Supreme Lord. That means ultimately Maya is also the agent of Supreme Lord only. Now the question comes is, so that means Lord is all powerful, then how can he be all compassionate? So how can he be compassionate? So when we say he's not compassionate means we are saying that some injustice is there. So injustice would be there to a person who is looking only for small duration of time. But for a person who knows about the previous lives, he'll understand that there is no injustice in this world. Just certain incidences are heart rendering. It's like, it's so painful to see. Like recently, so many media is filled with so many injustices. Some very famous movies came later in the, or they're coming also nowadays. Like, no, they're talking about how so much injustice has been done. So sometimes, people really wonder, oh, how can Lord allow such a thing to happen? So the point is that we know about only the person's activities in this life. We don't know about the previous lives. It's like somebody comes and steals in someone's house, and the owner of the house runs behind that person. And by the time the person is caught, he's in a public area. And then the owner of the house starts beating the thief. People will, if somebody who just looks at the incident, what he will understand? This innocent fellow, so lean and thin, looks so poor. And this fellow is so wicked that he's beating him. Such an injustice in the world. But he doesn't know that he's already done some activity in the past. So that's why unless until one considers this aspect of rebirth, the aspect of karma, one can't understand or one can't get the answer to these questions. And that is the reason this Vedic philosophy is so powerful. So the biggest of the questions in the world for most of the religions, we have answers in our Vedic scriptures. So Maya is caused by the Supreme Lord only. But then Prabhupada gives the example of snow, darkness, and clouds. So cloud is product of sun only. Sun heats the water bodies, creates the clouds. But does cloud cover the sun? Manohar Dujpro, does it cover the sun?
We cannot see sun because of it.
Yeah. So whom does he cover? Whom does the cloud cover?
Our view, our eyes.
Yeah. Yes. So cloud covers our view to the sun, not the sun itself. So similarly, Maya is also Krishna's energy only, but it covers the living entities, not the Supreme Lord himself. So that is how Maya works. Or very graphic example is the example of darkness. Like when darkness is there, so if we are in front of the sun, can we see the darkness? Yes or no? No? We can see the darkness. We can see the darkness.
Yes.
When can you see the darkness?
You go in the empty room.
No, no. In this, even if you're in front of sun, still you can see the darkness.
If we just turn around.
If we turn around. If we turn around, we see our shadow and we see the darkness. So because shadow is the absence of light, it is darkness. But if we are seeing towards the sun, then there is no darkness. So when do we see the effect of Maya? when we don't see Krishna. So Krishna Surasa Maya Andakar, Jahan Krishna Taha Nahi Maya Radhikar. So where there is light, there's no essence. So if you turn towards Lord, then there's no darkness. If you turn away from the Lord, then there is darkness. So till when are the sufferings? Sufferings are there till we don't fully become Krishna conscious. If you become fully Krishna consciousness, fully Krishna conscious, then there's no suffering. So that's why Bhakti would say that the only thing which the world lacks is the lack of Krishna consciousness. Okay, so please read the next one, next translation and purport.
Text 10. The living entity is in distress regarding his self-identity. He has no factual background, like a man who dreams that he sees his head cut off. Purport. A teacher in school once threatened his pupil that he would cut off the pupil's head and hang it on the wall so that the child could see how his head had been cut off. The child became frightened and stopped his mischief. Similarly, the miseries of the pure soul and the disruption of his self-identification are managed by the external energy of the Lord, which controls those mischievous living entities who want to go against the will of the Lord. Actually, there is no bondage or misery for the living entity, nor does he ever lose his pure knowledge. In his pure consciousness, when he thinks a little seriously about his position, he can understand that he is eternally subordinate to the mercy of the Supreme, and that his attempt to become one with the Supreme Lord is a false illusion. Life after life, the living entity falsely tries to lord over material nature and become the lord of the material world, but there is no tangible result. At last, when frustrated, he gives up his material activities and tries to become one with the Lord and speculate with much jugglery of words, but without success. These activities are performed under the dictation of the illusory energy. The experience is compared to the experience of one's having his head cut off in a dream. The man whose head has been cut off also sees that his head has been cut off. If a person's head is severed, he loses his power to see. Therefore, if a man sees that his head has been cut off, it means that he thinks like that in hallucination. Similarly, a living entity is eternally subordinate to the Supreme Lord, and he has this knowledge with him. But artificially, he thinks that he is God himself, and that although he is God, he has lost his knowledge due to Maya. This conception has no meaning, just as there is no meaning to seeing one's head being cut off. This is the process by which knowledge is covered. And because this artificial rebellious condition of the living entity gives him all troubles, it is to be understood that he should take to his normal life as a devotee of the Lord and be relieved from the misconception of being God. The so-called liberation of thinking oneself God is that last reaction of avidya by which the living entity is entrapped. The conclusion is that a living entity deprived of eternal transcendental service to the Lord becomes illusioned in many ways. Even in his conditional life, he is the eternal servant of the Lord. His servitude under the spell of illusory Maya is also a manifestation of his eternal condition of service. Because he has rebelled against the service of the Lord, he is therefore put in the service of the Maya. He is still serving, but in a perverted manner. When he wants to get out of service under material bondage, he next desires to become one with the Lord. This is another illusion. The best course, therefore, is to surrender unto the Lord and thus get rid of the illusory Maya for good, as confirmed in Bhagavad Gita 7.14. Devi eshi gunamayi mama maya durataya mam evam prapadyante maya mitam tarantite.
A very beautiful example. Prabhupada speaks very graphically. The teacher told to the student, when he was very mischievous, I'll cut off your head and hang on the ceiling. And then you will see how your head is cut off. So if my head is cut off, how will I see? So similarly, so the suffering of the living entity is actually suffering in illusion only. Living entity doesn't suffer. So whole suffering is because of misidentification. There is no actual suffering. So in illusion, we consider ourselves to be the gross body and the subtle body. And because of this misidentification, we suffer in this world. Actually speaking, we have nothing to do with it. And it's like a beautiful incidents. That one villager went to the football match, and he saw that now all the players on the ground, they're so busy, and all the people are so anxious. So then he asked one person. He said that why everybody is so much anxious? Why they are having so much anxieties? Thousands of people in so much of anxiety. So this man said that actually they're playing football. So in football, but what are they doing? He was saying all of them are trying to kick this football. Then he said, my God. Now you're spending so much money, you don't have a simple solution to all the problem. So what is the solution? Give one football to all the players. Everybody can kick the football, you know. Why everybody has to struggle to just kick one football? It's a simple thing, no? So the point is that because this villager was not identifying himself that with the rules of the match, he was not affected. Other people who were there were so much affected. And we've sometimes seen even in the sports, some people who have nothing to do with the sports. It's like they're not cricketers, they never played cricket in life, but they become so much absorbed in the sports that sometimes they beat each other. Or sometimes they break the TV. Why? Because of identification. So the whole problem is that we identify with the gross body and the subtle body because of illusion, thinking that we are the body and we are the mind, and then we suffer. So what Maya does is, it's like we had a desire to enjoy, we came in this world, and she gives us so many options that we become attached to those options. And that is how we become entangled in this world. So the whole suffering is suffering in illusion. So that's exactly what Vidura speaks. Sorry, Lord Maitreya Muni speaks. Please read 11th. Translation and purport both.
As the moon reflected on water appears to be to the seer to tremble due to being associated with the quality of the water, so the self associated with matter appears to be qualified as matter. Purport. The Supreme Lord, the Supreme Soul, the personality of Godhead, is compared to the moon in the sky, and the living entities are compared to the reflection of the moon on water. The moon in the sky is fixed and does not appear to quiver like the moon on the water. Actually, like the original moon in the sky, the moon reflected on the water should also not quiver. But because of being associated with water, the reflection appears to be quivering. Although the actual fact, the moon is fixed. The water moves, but the moon does not move. Similarly, the living entities appear to be tainted by material qualities like illusion, lamentation, and miseries. Although in pure soul, such qualities are completely absent. The word pratiyate, which means apparently and not actually, like the experience of having one's head cut off in a dream, is significant here. The reflection of the moon on the water is the separate rays of the moon and not the actual moon. The separated parts and parcels of the Lord, entangled in the water of material existence, have the quivering quality. Whereas the Lord is like the actual moon in the sky, which is not at all in touch with water. The light of the sun and moon reflected on matter makes the matter bright and praiseworthy. The living symptoms are compared to the light of the sun and the moon, illuminating material manifestations like trees and mountains. The reflection of the sun or moon is accepted as the real sun or moon by less intelligent men, and the pure monistic philosophy develops from these ideas. In fact, the light of the sun and moon are actually different from the sun and moon themselves, although they are always connected. The light of the moon spread throughout the sky appears to be impersonal, but the moon planet, as it is personal, and the living entities on the moon planet are also personal. In the rays of the moon, different material entities appear to be comparatively more or less important. The light of the moon on the Taj Mahal appears to be more beautiful than the same light in the wilderness. Although the light of the moon is the same everywhere, due to being differently appreciated, it appears different. Similarly, the light of the Lord is equally distributed everywhere, but due to being differently received, it appears to be different. One should not therefore accept the reflection of the moon on the water as actual and misunderstand the whole situation through monistic philosophy. The quivering quality of the moon is also variable. When the water is standing still, there is no quivering. In more settled condition, soul quivers less. But due to material connection, the quivering quality is more or less present everywhere. Thank you.
So, thank you. Now, this very beautiful example giving the example of a moon. Like when moon is there in the sky, the reflection of the moon may be there in the, let us say, ocean. And because there are waves in the ocean, moon seems to be quivering or distorted. So moon is beyond. Moon has nothing to do with the reflection. But the reflection of the moon seems to be like moon. So similarly, all the living entity and Supreme Lord both are beyond. They're beyond the modes of material nature. But because their activities are in connection with the three modes of material nature, it seems that they're affected by three modes of material nature. Although in reality, they have no connection. And like in mode of goodness, the misery is minimum. It is like the lake is very still. And mode of passion and ignorance, it's like very turbulent. So similarly, living entity looks very miserable. So that is how it seems like that, although it has no connection. Actually, moon is there in the sky. And Prabhupada defeats Mayavadis also by saying that they don't understand this thing. It's like fishes in the lake may think the reflection of the moon is one of the fishes or another creature of the water. But they don't know that the moon is there high in the sky. Similarly, when Lord comes in this world, so-called impersonalists and Mayavadis, they think Lord is like all of us. Especially the Mayavadi. They think that Lord's name, form, qualities, pastimes are Maya like our pastimes or our time pass, whatever. So they don't understand that Lord is beyond. Lord has nothing to do with three modes of material nature. Similarly, living entity also doesn't have anything to do with material nature. But because we identify with this body, gross and subtle, we suffer. And once this misidentification is gone, there is no more suffering. So suffering continues till the misconception continues. Misconception ends, suffering ends. But the suffering cannot end artificially. It's like a person who is haunted by ghost and he thinks that I am the king. So he would be really miserable by seeing that how his citizens are not obeying him. So somebody is haunted by ghost and he says, no, go and bring water for me. And nobody is bringing water for him. He'll be miserable. Now go and clean this place. Nobody is cleaning the place. He'll be so miserable. And if you convince him that you are not the king, he will not be convinced also. Because he's convinced, he's haunted by ghost. So how he can be cured? Only when some exhaustion comes there He takes broom in one hand, peacock feather in another hand, and beats snow on his head and chants some mantras. Then he will get rid of the ghost, and then he will come to his senses. So similarly, Vishwanath Thakur in one of the verses of Bhagavad Gita, he says, similarly, just by convincing that person that you are not the body, your spirit soul, he will not become free from misery. So what do you have to do? He has to practice bhakti yoga. By practice of devotion service, which is like chanting of the mantras and beating with the broom, by that a person will gradually come to realize that I am not this body, I am different from the body. So we know the fact, at the same time we fail to have that stable realization that I am not the body, because we are still haunted by the ghost. The ghost of trying to enjoy this world. So it will go off gradually with the practice of devotion service or bhakti yoga. So it's 8:18 now. What we can do have a maybe 10 minutes break, and then we'll come back. And then we'll have another session from 8:30 to 9:30. Hare Krishna. Hare Krishna. So if devotees are back, then we can start. Somebody can read 12th and 13th translation.
Wait.
That misconception of
But that misconception of self-identity can be diminished gradually by the mercy of personality of Godhead Vasudev through the process of devotional service to the Lord in the mode of detachment. When the senses are satisfied in the seer super soul, the personality of Godhead, and merge in him, all miseries are completely vanquished as far as after a sound sleep.
Thank you. So the first this text number 12, as I was telling you before also, that it is by practice of devotional service only that gradually one can come out of the misconception of self-identity. So like a person haunted by ghost cannot be convinced that he's haunted by ghost. Similarly, just by hearing so many times that we are not body, we are soul, we can't be convinced. So it will gradually happen by the process of devotion service in the mode of detachment, because basically Maitra Muni is also Gyan Misra Bhakta. So he also recommends the devotion service mixed with mode of detachment. And when the senses are fully satisfied by seeing the super soul, and they're merged in him. Merged in him means they're fully engaged in the Supreme Lord. Then all miseries are vanquished. Because Lord is called Akhil Rasamrit Murti. He's the complete embodiment of all rasas. He is the complete embodiment of all pleasures of the world. So when the senses are fully engaged or absorbed in the Supreme Lord, then what one gets is pleasure, because one is absorbed in pleasure. So when senses are absorbed in displeasure, what we experience is displeasure. When they're experiencing pleasure, absorbed in pleasure, we get experience pleasure. So this world is Asat, Achit, Niranand. Whole matter, whether gross or subtle. So if senses are absorbed in Niranand, what will we get? Niranand. If senses are absorbed in Anand, and what to say of Paramanand, Supreme Lord, then what will we get is Paramanand. This is a simple formula. So wherever we absorb our senses, we will be experiencing that particular thing. So if our senses are absorbed in Naam, Roop, good leela of the Lord, we will be always be happy. Okay, and the immediate effect of chanting and hearing about the Lord or practice of devotion service is explained in text number 40. So you can repeat this after. Asese sanklese samam vidatte
Ashish Sanklesha Samam Vidattate
gunanuvada shravanam murare
Gunanuvada Shavanam Murare
kim va purastat charanaravindam
Imva Punastat Charanam Varvinda
parag sevaratiratma labdha.
Parang Sevarati Atma Labdha.
Please read translation as well as the purport.
Simply by chanting and hearing of the transcendental name, form, etc. of the personality of Godhead Shri Krishna, one can achieve the cessation of unlimited miserable conditions. Therefore, what to speak of those who have attained attraction for serving the flavor of the dust of the Lord, not the sweet? Purport. Two different methods for controlling the material senses are recommended in the Vedic scripture in wisdom. One of them is process of Gyan, or the path of philosophical understanding of the Supreme, Brahma, Paramatma, and Bhagavan. The other is that of the direct engagement in the transcendental loving devotion service of the Lord. Of these two most popular methods, the path of devotional service is recommended here as the best, because one on the path of devotional service doesn't have to wait for the attainment of the fugitive results of pious activities or for the result of the knowledge. The two stages of executing devotional service are: first, the stage of practicing devotional service with our present senses under the regulations of the recognized scriptures, and second, attaining sincere attachment for serving the particles of the dust of the lotus feet of the Lord. The first stage is called sadhana bhakti, or devotional service for the neophyte, which is rendered under the direction of a pure devotee. And the second stage is called raga bhakti, in which the mature devotee automatically takes to the various services of the Lord out of the sincere attachment. The great sage Maitreya now gives the final answer to all the questions of the Vidura. Devotional service to the Lord is the ultimate means to mitigate all the miserable conditions of the material existence. The path of knowledge, or that of mystic gymnastics, may be adopted as a means for the purpose, but unless mixed with bhakti or devotional service, they are
Hare Krishna. Okay, thank you.
mute हो गए हो। Mute हो गए। Hare Krishna.
हाँ.
Hare Krishna.
So last 4-5 lines we were not able to hear. Other we are able to hear.
The path of knowledge, or that of the mystic gymnastics, may be adopted as a means for the purpose, but unless mixed with the bhakti or devotional service, they are unable to award the desired result. By practicing sadhana bhakti, one may gradually rise to the point of raga bhakti, and by performing raga bhakti in devotional transcendental service, one can even control the supreme powerful Lord. Thank you.
Hare Hare. So Prabhupada has given the nice purport to this verse. Asese sanklese samamvidatte gurānuvāda sravanam murare. Just by Sravanam and Kirtanam of the Lord, one can get rid of unlimited miseries. And what to say of those who really have that attachment for the Lord? That means just by practice of sadhana bhakti, one can get rid of all the miseries. What to say if somebody has a ragavana bhakti for the Lord? So even the beginners get rid of misery. What to say of the perfected ones? So that's why just by practicing our devotion service, one can get rid of all the miseries. That is the conclusion. Because Vidura was concerned that how people are suffering in this world. So he gave the solution. Yes, Amrind Haripru, you had a question. You can directly ask. I couldn't understand in what reference you were asking the question.
So you are giving the example of football player, that the measures, one who don't know about the rules of football, he was neither happy neither in sorrow. So probably in our practical life, ignorance is not an excuse. Okay, if you not know anything,
Okay. I couldn't hear your question completely, but I could understand the essence. So I'll just answer it. So what I understood is that you are asking that now this man who went to the football match, he was in ignorance about the football match. So the highlight of the example was not ignorance. The highlight of the example was misidentification. So those who identify with football are affected by football. Those who don't identify with football match will not be affected by football match. Similarly, those who when we identify with matter, we suffer. When we don't identify with matter, we don't suffer. When we identify ourselves as Krishnadas and we identify with the name, form, qualities, passion of the Lord, we don't suffer. To the degree we identify with matter, we suffer. So that was the highlight.
yes, in the next sloka,
Prove your voice is getting stuck.
एक बार covered करिए. My doubt was clear.
अच्छा
होगा जी Doubt
हाँ,
is clear, Prajit. Clear, Prajit.
the doubt is clear.
Next talk was related to that only.
Okay, okay, okay. Fine, fine, fine. I think maybe your earphone has a problem. When that mic is not good. Now, when you spoke afterwards, na, it was like very clear.
Yes,
Anyway, advanced technology is not always very advanced.
yes, Prajit.
Okay. Yeah. So that is how this was the like no. That is how if you want to really make a person miserable, first give him misidentification. So there's a pastime about one sage. So this sage was nicely doing his tapasya. And as usual, Indra became very fearful and disturbed. He thought that no, if this fellow continues his tapasya like that, maybe he will snatch away my post of Indra. So Indra went to the sage and he gave him his sword. And he told that actually you just keep this sword and I'll come after some time and I'll take the sword. And then Indra went away. Now the sage was already a Brahmana doing the tapasya. What now sage has to do with the sword? But while now relaxing after doing a lot of tapasya for some time, one thing came in his mind, no, let me just see the sword. So then he saw the sword, no, really very sharp and lightweight at the same time. No, it can kill thousands of people. Then slowly, slowly he developed that attachment for the sword. And then he thought, let me start using the sword. So he started using the sword also. And that is how he became distracted from his tapasya. Now for Bharat Maharaj, we hear about deer, but this fellow no got swept away by the sword only. So thing is that actually as soon as we start identifying it with a particular thing, we start getting affected. Those who don't identify, don't get affected. Like people who are very interested in politics, they're affected by politics. Those who are not interested in politics, it doesn't matter. Those who are very interested in family politics, they're affected by family politics. Or for Brahmacharya, it is sometimes temple politics. And those who identify, they are very much affected. Those who don't identify, they're not affected. So whatever we identify with, we are affected by that. So that's the key. So to the degree we identify with name, form, qualities, pastimes of the Lord, Krishna Seva, to that degree we can be happy. To the degree we identify with other things, we'll be unhappy. So we may have to deal with the world, but do the needful. That is Prabhupada's formula. Yes, Jagat Mata, Sachi Mata.
Hare Krishna Prabhuji. Dandavat Pranam. Prabhuji, whatever things we have around us, people or things, we get attached. The spirituality is all about detachment. So the detachment happens when we perform devotional services automatically, or we have to perform some other things also, yeah, or it will happen automatically. This attachment happens to the sage automatically when he has a thing, he has a sword. So how the detachment will happen?
So main thing is, if to the degree you are attached to Krishna consciousness, to the degree detachment will automatically come. Because the one real fact is always there that attachment to Krishna will give us pleasure. So Maya is as attractive as Krishna, but one difference is that Krishna can satisfy us, Maya cannot satisfy us. So matter can never satisfy us. It is only Supreme Lord who can satisfy. So that's why we may go up and down through different phases in life. But if we continue to stay in a son of devotees, if we continue to practice Krishna consciousness devotion service, success is 100% guaranteed. So that is how, what to say detachment, it comes naturally. Naturally means because it is not giving pleasure. Na? When we have alternative, why will we get attached to it? Like we have so many devotees who have this relation with every ISKCON devotee. Like initially some people who are so attached to eating meat. So when they start eating prasad, taking prasad, just in few years, the same meat starts giving bad stench. And people themselves wonder, how would we eat meat? Now, especially we know about Bengali devotees, like not everyone, but many of them, they had a habit of not eating fish. Now, fish stinks like anything. Even the people who eat fish also stink. So, in our home, we had a culture that, like my mother never took onion garlic from childhood. Onion garlic was not like cooked in our home. So when we went to, she came to like visit Mayapur, Puri along with me. So then, no, both my mother and Taiji, you understand Taiji, you're North Indians. So both of them were like, women were like, no, they were closing their nose. I told, no, why you're closing the nose? When we are getting smell of fish. So then I saw here and there, no, there's no fish here. So then, no, these men are smelling like fish. Then I can't do anything about it. No, तो अब वो खा के आया हूँ. What can we do? So the point is that even our devotees identify. So that is why one doesn't have to work very hard to really get rid of material sense gratification. As soon as we start getting pleasure in Krishna consciousness, automatically this comes. But at the same time, if some things are really obstructing our Krishna consciousness, then we should make some endeavor to purify ourselves. Anukula sankalpa pratikula svarjana. So what we have to stop is something which is like becoming stumbling block to our Krishna consciousness. That has to avoid it. Okay. Yeah. Thank you. Yes, sir. Daruka Krishnapu.
Hare Krishna, Prabhu. My question is this. Now, this is something very interesting you're sharing. But my question is that certainly that, like say in our position, we are not aware of what is going in GBC. So really, it's not affecting me what decision they are taking there. But those are actually GBC, sitting on the GBC positions. They are taking so big decision, critical decision, those are valuable for whole ISKCON family. And still they are able to perform their devotional services. So they are taking decisions blindly, or they don't care that what is going to happen in ISKCON. Maybe I'm talking negatively, but I just want to understand how they would take decision in that scenario.
Okay. So now, do GBCs get affected while taking these decisions? They may or may not be, depending on the realization. Now, those who are very exalted devotees, it's like they are attached to things only because it is connected to Krishna. Like, for example, two people are sitting in the house. One person is the owner of the house, and another person is not owner of the house. But he dutifully understands that when I am enjoying the facilities of the house, I am responsible for the house. So now if house catches fire, among both the people, who will try to extinguish the fire? Yes, that was question.
Both of them.
Yeah, because one is responsible, the other person is attached. But who will be affected more by the fire?
Who belongs to whose house is that?
Because he's attached. So that is why GBCs may do things very, especially those who I'm talking about, those who are really exalted souls. They may do things very, it's like with a lot of responsibility, as if they're attached. But they do it more dutifully as a service to Krishna. If it is service to Krishna, I'm attached. If it is not service to Krishna, it doesn't matter. And after some time, they understand there are things beyond us. Like even in front of Prabhupada, there were so many things which were getting wrong. And Prabhupada was disturbed. It's not that he was not disturbed. But then he knew how to get detached from that. It's like once, Prabhupada was sitting in an initiation ceremony, and then everything was wrong. So it's like there were no fruits kept near the Yagikunda. So Prabhupada said that, no, bring the fruits. And then devotees brought the cut fruits. Prabhupada said, and Prabhupada said, and they said, no, Prabhupada, we've offered it. No, you don't worry, you eat them. Prabhupada said, not these fruits. I want fruits for yajna. And these were the only fruits. Now you've cut them. What hell will I do? And Prabhupada was getting angry. And this was getting recorded in the national television channel. And they thought that the spiritual master getting angry is a part of initiation ceremony. But they never saw it before. And when Prabhupada was angry like that, suddenly one hippie came to Prabhupada, who just became a devotee. And he said to Prabhupada, Swamiji, why are you so angry? Chant Hare Krishna and be happy. Prabhupada really took it seriously. Prabhupada kept his head in the bead bag and he started chanting. So that is how it's like. And sometimes Prabhupada was even affected also. It's like they are attached to Krishna. They know where to take off. But at the same time, certain times, no, one may get affected also. It's like during this Dr. N time, Dr. Nair in Juhu case. So that time Tamal Samadhi were telling Prabhupada, why are we holding to this property? No, it's like my chanting is getting disturbed. My whole consciousness is absorbed in this case only. So Prabhupada said, no, even my chanting is getting affected. But ultimately, we should do something for Krishna. So there were times when Prabhupada was not affected at all. There were times Prabhupada was little bit affected. But main thing is, when people see everything in relationship to Krishna, then at a point of time, a devotee has to judge that what is the priority at a particular time. So sometimes, like our only sadhana is the priority, then one may do things dutifully and just like take shelter of sadhana. Sometimes certain services may be really very crucial that even if sadhana is getting affected, it's like one may take a risk. So that comes with maturity. So because Bombay was a very important project and Prabhupada knew that Juhu is going to, at that time only it was a forest. But Prabhupada knew that it is going to become the prime spot for whole of Bombay. And now we see the effect of so many TV stars, this and that, and movie stars. They glorify this Juhu, ISKCON Juhu. So that is how sometimes so things are not like they don't get affected at all, or they always get affected. But they have a better ability than us to not get affected. So that's like, as a person progresses in Krishna consciousness, one gets a better ability. I personally came across few devotees, how they would deal with the problems. Those who are very been practicing for 35, 40, 50 years. So when I saw them it's like they knew how to take some very strong actions without offending the person who is being punished for his offense, taking care of the things and still not getting much affected. So that comes gradually with advancement in Krishna consciousness, and also it comes with experience. So for me, it was like bewilderment. I just can't handle such situations. I knew that. But people, devotees, over a period of time when they get purified, it becomes easy for them. So still they may get sometimes affected. And that's the reason no outside person is allowed in GBC meeting. It's like now one may get affected. We may go in the GBC meeting and we find that our own spiritual master is being criticized by some other Prabhupada disciples. So we may become like flared up. So then that's why no other devotees had that, don't worry, no, let senior devotees adjust on themselves. And sometimes they get affected, sometimes they're not affected. What I heard from Bhakti Charu Maharaj, that's like before his departure. Maharaj said that same GBC meeting, same GBC members, they have evolved a lot because they all got purified. He was telling that 20 years before, 25 years before, GBC meetings were extremely passionate. So shouting and yelling was like something normal. And he said, but because now devotees have evolved, they are either in goodness or pure goodness, same people. He was saying it's like such a sweet experience in GBC meeting. So now it's like, so things evolve over here. So
Thank
I
you.
hope I could understand.
Yeah, thank you, Guruji. Thank you so much.
Okay, Hare Krishna. Okay, so we did till, yes, now 15 to 22. Now Vidura is sharing his heartfelt relations with matrimony. So please read 15, 16, 17, all three.
Vidura said, "O powerful sage, my lord, all my doubts about the Supreme Personality of Godhead, the living entities, have now been removed by your convincing words. The mind is now perfectly entering into them. O learned sage, your explanations are very good, as they should be. Disturbances to the conditioned soul have no other basis than the movement of the external energy of the Lord. Both the lowest of fools and he who is transcendental to all intelligence enjoy happiness, whereas person between them suffer the material pangs." Thank you.
So this vortex 17 is really, it's like difficult to appreciate, but really is a reality. So what Vidura says is, now I have understood. Devotional service is the solution. So the entire problem is problem with misidentification. So to the degree we are misidentify, to the degree we suffer. And really speaking, that even if for a temporary moment we can get out of this misidentification, it gives a lot of freedom from misery. But many times we ourselves don't apply that philosophy. So I still remember one devotee, one Mataji was there. So she was not really preaching and impressing, like it's like no, very impressive in her preaching, creating so many devotees. But then she herself was asking one question that no, Prabhuji, somehow no, this whenever I am personally miserable, I tell people that no, chant Hare Krishna and be happy, but I become very miserable. And when I get miserable, somehow this no Krishna consciousness doesn't work on me. But whenever I hear this Brahma Kumari, it becomes very effective. And I was really surprised. I said, what do they say that becomes so effective? So then she was sharing that no, they say that no, आप प्रेममयी आत्मा है, आप शांत आत्मा है, आपका इस दुनिया से कुछ लेना देना नहीं है. I said, Mataji, Prabhupada speaks that in practically, every second or third purport, that you are not the body, you are soul. So when you hear it from Brahma Kumar, it is so convincing. And you hear from Prabhupada books, it is not convincing. And that is the time she realized that many times we preach philosophy, but we don't apply the philosophy. So whenever there are miseries in life, what we have to do is we have to preach our mind. We have to preach our mind. So we remember to preach everyone except ourselves. So that is how even a little application of this philosophy saves us to a great extent. And then Vidura says this, both the lowest of fools and he who is transcendental to all intelligence enjoy happiness. That means people who are fully engrossed in this world and people who are great transcendentalists, for them there is no suffering. Suffering is there for the people in between. Because for the people who are very engrossed, no, they become habituated to the suffering. They adjust with the suffering. So many times when we go to the outside and we tell them that this world is full of misery, they think that you are filled with misery. They are not miserable. I still remember we were distributing books. So we went to one bookseller. So he was like having some books in his bag and he was selling in the train. We were also distributing Bhagavad Gita in the train. So then I thought, no, let me give him also this book. So I showed him Bhagavad Gita. And this man was telling, इसको पढ़ के क्या होगा? What will happen by reading? So I said, no, if you read it, you will understand who you are. You know, I know who I am. No, you don't have to tell me. Then I told him, then you will get rid of miseries. And he started looking at me. And then he told me, are you free from miseries? I told him, yeah, to quite a good extent, may not be fully, but at least I'm less miserable than I was before. Then you're telling, if you are really free from misery, why would you be selling books like me? So the point is that people don't understand they're miserable unless until they get a higher pleasure. So what happens with the devotees is we have a taste for higher pleasure, but that doesn't stay for long. That's not like a continuous realization. And because of that, devotees in between are the most miserable people. It's like if you cover a person with a blanket and beat him left and right, and he doesn't know who's beating, he thinks that no, maybe these beatings are part of life. Then people have a theory, दुख सुख तो लगा रहता है, ऐसे adjust करना पड़ता है. It's part of life, you just adjust. But for a person, if you remove his blanket and then you beat him, he becomes really miserable. He knows it's not a part of life. I'm really suffering. So a person in between is really no suffering. So that's exactly what Vidura is speaking. So of course, we know that it will end in due course of time. Okay. Now let's discuss text number 18. Can you repeat after me? Arthabhavam vinischitya
Arthabhavam vinischitya
pratitasyapi natmanah
prati prati pratitasyapi natmanah
tam chapi yusmacharana
tam chapi yushmacharana
sevayaham paranude.
sevayaham
Please read the translation and the purport.
But my dear sir, I am obliged to you because now I can understand that this material manifestation is without substance, although it appears real. I'm confident that by serving your feet, it will be possible for me to give up the false idea. Purport. The sufferings of the conditioned soul are superficial and have no intrinsic value, like the cutting off of one's head in a dream. Yet, although this statement is theoretically very true, it is very difficult for a common man or the neophyte on the transcendental path to realize practically. However, by serving the feet of great transcendentalists like Maitri Muni and by constantly associating with him, one is enabled to give up the false idea that the soul suffers from the material pangs.
Thank you. So this is like a common theme which has been repeated in many, many places. So Rahu Gunestat Tapasa na yati na che jaya nirvapanad grahadva na chandasa na vajalagni surya vina mahatpad rajo abhishekam. So bina mahatpad rajo abhishekam, unless until one smears the dust of the lotus feet of the Lord and bathes with it, one cannot get rid of this bodily consciousness. So that's why when we associate with exalted devotees of the Lord, and when actually we are reading Bhagavatam, we are associating with the exalted devotees of the Lord. Because we hear what they are speaking, their question answers, So that is how, even while discussing book Bhagavat, we are associating with person Bhagavat, because it is filled with personalities. Similarly, when we associate with person Bhagavats also, so then also by seeing how they are detached from the body, how they are so tolerant, then we also, it's like learn how to be free from misidentification with the material nature. So that is how we can slowly give up this false idea by associating with exalted devotees of the Lord. Okay. Yes, sir. Radha Kisapro. You have a question, Prabhu?
Yes. Prabhuji, last sentence, later part. One is unable to give up the false idea that the soul suffers from the material pangs. It means that soul doesn't suffer.
Yes, soul doesn't suffer. Soul doesn't suffer in the sense that is suffering in illusion. Like for example, if you go to movie theater, no, I'm not recommending, but just giving an
No,
example.
that is true. The people are crying there, laughing there.
So they're suffering in misery actually. They're suffering in illusion. That's not the real suffering.
Okay, then what is the real suffering?
So the real suffering is forgetfulness of Krishna.
Okay.
So in one sense,
whatever the soul body feels, it is not felt by the soul.
See, actually speaking, in one sense, soul is suffering, because who's experiencing? Soul is experiencing. Gross body and subtle body cannot experience. But main thing is that this suffering is suffering in illusion. This is not suffering in reality. That is what actually Vidura is or Prabhupada is emphasizing.
Well, we are going this way and that way, both ways. Achintya bheda bheda tattva.
No, it's not Achintya bheda bheda. It's very clear. Who is experiencing misery? We are only experiencing misery, but this misery, experience of misery is misery in illusion. Like for example, when we are miserable in our dream, we do get affected. It's like, if a lion is chasing us and we are running away, even sweat comes out sometimes.
Yeah, exactly.
So we are only suffering. But then when we get up, we say, this was suffering in illusion.
Yeah.
So similarly, as soon as we become awake to self-realization, then we understand, oh, this was suffering in illusion. It is like that. Until we are absorbed in matter, what happens is, we try our best to somehow get rid of suffering. In illusion only. It's like when children play video game, they're so absorbed, and it's like defeating each other. Especially now, there are no lot of games in which many players can play. And they are like so much absorbed in it. But for parents, they think, useless fellow. And he's so, whenever he becomes a he wins, he is excited and he jumps up and down. And when it's like his car crashes or something happens in the video game, then a child is so morose. So then parents, they think, no, it's like no useless thing. So it's the same way how Krishna sees at all of us. He becomes sometimes happy, sometimes morose. Krishna says, time pass. Okay, Radha Keshav.
One thing more here. When we say something, my mind is disturbed. Because man, buddhi and ankar is also there. I say my mind is disturbed. So it means only mind is disturbed, not the soul.
Yeah, you are not mind, na? If you identify with the mind, then you are disturbed. If you don't identify with the mind, you are not disturbed.
Okay. It means if I identify, now I am talking from the gross level. If I identify with the mind, then mind suffers.
We suffer, not mind. How can mind suffer? Mind is a matter.
You said if you identify with the mind.
Then we suffer. If we identify with the mind, who suffers? We suffer.
Not the mind.
Not the mind. Like, I'll give you a very simple example. Now again, something which I'm not recommending, but let us say you are watching a cricket match. It's not recommended one. And at the same time, you hear that some children are also playing cricket match outside. And suddenly you hear a sound. And you feel that somebody broke the glass of your car. What is the immediate response? If you feel it is your car.
Yeah.
The immediate response is we fold the sleeves, we peep out the window, and we see the who is the culprit who broke the glass of my car. But as soon as we see it is not my car, it is neighbor's car. What is the response? अरे बच्चे हैं खेलते रहते हैं कभी कभी कांच छोड़ देते हैं ना सीरियसली लेना नहीं चाहिए children know the kids to keep on playing sometimes they break the glass not to take seriously. Why? It's not my car, it is neighbor's car. I am attached to my car, not the neighbor's car. Now really speaking, why I'm not affected by it? Because I'm not attached to it. I am attached to my car, not the neighbor's car. Similarly, to the degree we are attached to our own body and mind and senses, to the degree we suffer. To the degree we are detached from it, we don't suffer. I hope this example clarifies the.
Yeah, it is mentioned only this way. It is mentioned that in case you are attached, then you will suffer, and in case you are not attached, you will not suffer. It is mentioned by Prabhupada many times. The only thing is that sometimes we say that the soul doesn't suffer. We say that because it is a pure one, it is Satchit and Anand, so it doesn't suffer.
Yeah, so who suffer? Actually, soul only suffers. So let me tell you the one growth. So whenever the scripture says soul doesn't suffer means soul doesn't suffer in reality. But soul does suffer in illusion. So even in illusion, who is suffering? Soul is only suffering. So who suffers? Soul only suffers. Because matter cannot suffer, na? Something which is not conscious cannot suffer. Something which is conscious can only suffer. So who suffers? Soul only suffers.
Okay, thank you, Prabhuji. Thank you.
Thank you. Hare Krishna. Okay, so now we'll go to 19th. 19th is like a verse worth memorizing. So you can repeat after me. Yat sevaya bhagavata kutasya madhudasa pratiraso bhavet tivraha padayor vasanardanaha. Please the translation and the purport.
By surveying the feet of the spiritual master, one is enabled to develop transcendental ecstasy in the service of the personality of Godhead, who is the unchangeable enemy of the Madhu demon and whose service vanquishes one's material distress. Okay. The association of a bona fide spiritual master, like the sage Maitreya, can be of absolute help in achieving transcendental attachment for the direct service of the Lord. The Lord is the enemy of the Madhu demon, or in other words, he is the enemy of the suffering of his pure devotee. The word Rati, Ras is significant in this verse. Service to the Lord is rendered in different transcendental mellows, relationships, neutral, active, friendly, parental, and conjugal. A living entity in the liberated position of transcendental service to the Lord becomes attracted to one of the above mentioned mellows. And when one is engaged in transcendental loving service to the Lord, one's service attachment in the material world is automatically vanquished. As stated in Bhagavad Gita 259, Raso Varjam Raso Apyasya Param Dashtva Nivartate.
Thank you. So this verse is about the attachment to the lotus feet of the spiritual master. So attachment to the lotus feet of the spiritual master is basically attachment to serving Krishna as per instruction of the spiritual master. Because ultimately spiritual master wants us to serve Krishna. But we don't know how to please Krishna by our service. The spiritual master knows how to render service in such a way that Krishna is pleased. So if he's serving Krishna with under instruction of spiritual master, then in the conditioned state it acts like medicine, and in the liberated state it is very, very realizable. So in conditioned state it acts like a medicine for the jaundice patient, and in liberated state it becomes like sweet sugar candy. So same thing is there, but eventually if we continue, we will experience that sweetness also. Otherwise, sometimes too much service also, no, we feel so miserable. Oh, इतना क्यों दिया ना, थोड़ा कम देना चाहिए ना. Too much of purification, little less purification has to be there. Now, text 20. So this also is worthwhile memorizing. You can repeat after me. Durapa hi alpa tapasaha seva vaikunta vartmasu
Seva
yatropagiyate nityam
Nityam
deva devo janardanaha.
Devo Janardana.
Please read translation as well as the purport.
Persons whose austerity is meager can hardly obtain the service of pure devotees who are progressing on the path back to kingdom of Godhead, the Vaikunthas. The pure devotee engage 100% in glorifying the Supreme Lord, who is the Lord of demigods and the controller of all living entities. Purport. The path of liberation, as recommended by all authority, is to serve the Mahatma transcendentalist. As far as Bhagavad Gita is concerned, the Mahatmas are the pure devotees who are on the path to Vaikuntha, the kingdom of God, and who are always chant and hear the glories of the Lord rather than they talk of dry, profitless philosophy. This system of association has been recommended since time immemorial, but in this age of quarrel and hypocrisy, it is specially recommended by Lord Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. Even if one has no asset of favorable austerity, if he is nevertheless takes the shelter of Mahatmas who are engaged in chanting and hearing the glories of the Lord, he is sure to make progress on the path back to Godhead.
So, Durapahi alpa tapasaha. So somebody who has done little bit of austerity, alpa, very little, or not sufficient austerity. So then he cannot obtain the asana of pure devotees. Now, does that mean that now if we perform lot of austerities, we can get? No. Even by lot of austerities, we cannot get. It is only when pure devotees, they shower causeless mercy on someone, one gets an opportunity to practice devotion service. That is the only possibility, or that is the only solution. So only when one takes shelter of the Mahatmas, one engages in devotion service, and by engaging in devotion service, one's path progress back to God, it is open. Now, please read 21 and 22 translation.
Text 21. After creating the total material energy, the Mahat Tattva, and thereby manifesting the gigantic universal form with senses and sense organs, the Supreme Lord entered within it. Text 22. The Purusha incarnation lying on the causal ocean is called the original Purush in the material creation, and his Virat form, in whom all the planets and their inhabitants live, he has many thousands of legs and hands.
Yeah. So now he comes back to creation and tells that how that Supreme Lord, who is Karna Raksha Vishnu, lying on the causal ocean, then or Karan Sagar. That's why it's called causal. Karan means cause means Karan Sagar. And then he enters in the each and every universe as Garbhodaksha Vishnu and also as Virat form, as Virat Rupa, as we had discussed in our last class about his Virat incarnation. And that is how he expands himself. Now Vidura has further inquiries about this Virat Rupa, etc. Yes, please read 23, 24, and 25 translation.
O great Brahmana, you have told me that gigantic Virat form and his senses, sense objects, all and 10 kinds of life here exist with 3 kinds of life figure. Now, if you will, kindly explain to me the different powers of the specific divisions. Text 24. My Lord, I think that the process manifest in the forms of sons, grandsons, and family members has all spread all over the universe in different varieties and species. Text 25. O learned Brahmana, please describe how the leader of all the demigods, namely the Prajapati, Brahma, decided to establish the various Manus, the heads of the ages. Please describe the Manus also, and please describe the descendants of these Manus.
So now he's basically asking about the subsequent creation. That you told about Sarga, but I also want to know about Visarga. I also want to know the creation which is done by Lord Brahma. So please describe that also. How Brahma created Manus, Manuputras, etc. So I want to know all about all these details. Yes, please read 26, 27, 28.
O son of Mitra, kindly describe how the planets are situated above the earth as well as underneath it, and also please mention their measurement as well as that of the earthly planets. Also, please describe the living beings under different classifications to humans, those born of the embryo, those born of perspiration, those who are twice born, birds, and the planets and vegetables. Kindly describe their generations and subdivisions also. Will I continue?
28.
Please also describe the incarnations of the material modes of nature, Brahma, Vishnu, Maheshwara, and please describe the incarnation of the Supreme Personality of Godhead and his magnanimous activities.
Yeah. So he basically is asking about the universal structure, and he's asking about different classification of the subhumans, humans, and 4 types of living entities. Andaj, Svedaj, Udbij, and Jarayuja. So Andaj are those who are born from eggs, like the birds, reptiles like lizard, born from eggs. Then there are Svedaj, which are born from perspiration. So if we perspire and wear the same clothes for a very long time, then some living entities are born, and then they start biting us. Then there are Jarayuja, born from the womb, like human beings. And then there is Udbij, born from the seeds, like plants, trees, all of that. So these 4 types of living entities are there. Please tell about their divisions, subdivisions, and tell about the 3 good avatars: Brahma, Vishnu, Shiva. Brahmaji in mode of passion, Vishnu in mode of goodness, and Maheshwara in mode of ignorance. They're basically in charge of these 3 modes. So please tell about them also. And also tell about the real avatars of the Lord. How Lord comes and performs different pastimes. Yes. Please read 29, 30, 31.
O great sage, kindly describe the divisions and orders of human society in terms of symptoms, behavior, and the characteristics of mental equilibrium and sense control. Also, please describe the birth of the great sages and the categorical divisions of the Vedas. Please also describe the expansions of different sacrifices in the path of mystic powers, analytical study of knowledge and devotional service, all with their respective regulations. Please also describe the imperfections and contradictions of the faithless atheists, the situation of crossbreeding, and the movement of a living entities in various species of life according to their particular modes of nature and work. Thank you.
Thank you. Right. So please describe about different divisions and order of the human society, depending on the symptom, how they're divided. Then the characteristics of mental equilibrium, how to control our senses, different divisions of the Vedic scriptures, and different paths like Karma Yoga, Jnana Yoga, Ashtanga Yoga, Bhakti Yoga, all these different divisions of yogas. And also about imperfection and contradiction of faithless atheists. So their darshan is also there. And then how there is crossbreeding in different species. And also how living entities, they move into different species of life. In what mode they are there and how they work. And the further questions continue. Please read 32, 33, 34.
Hare Krishna. You may also describe the non-contradictory causes of religiosity, economic development, sense gratification, and salvation, and also the different means of livelihood and different processes of law and order as mentioned in the revealed scriptures. Text 33. Please also explain the regulations for offering respects to the forefathers, the creation of Pitraloka, the time schedule in the planets, stars and luminaries, and their respective situations. Please scroll on. Please also describe the fruitive results of charity and penance and of digging reservoirs of water. Please describe the situation of persons who are away from home and also the duty of a man in the awkward position. Should I continue?
I'll just explain them briefly, then we'll discuss that. So 32, 33, 34, he talks about that please tell me about dharma, artha, kama, moksha. Then different laws are there for different people, how they work. Then Pitri Lokas, what are the time duration there? In Kapil Dev section, we are going to discuss that also. Then the scheduled times of different planets, luminaries, etc. that we'll discuss in third canto. Kapil Dev section. Then different karma kanda activities. And person's duty who is away from home, who is in awkward position, that's basically called apad dharma, awkward position. So like Brahmanas in apad dharma can do the work of Vaishya, not possible in the work of Kshatriya, but never a work of a Sudra. So all these details he's basically asking. Okay, so 1 minute is remaining, but maybe we can read, just go through the questions of 35, 36, 37, 38. Just read them. This will end the section.
O sinless one, because the personality of Godhead, the controller of all living entities, is the father of all religion and all those who are candidates for religious activities, kindly describe how he can be completely satisfied. 36. O best among the Brahmanas, those who are spiritual masters are very kind to the needy. They are always kind to their followers, disciples, and sons, and without being asked by them. The spiritual master describes all that is knowledge. 37. Please describe how many dissolutions there are for the elements of material nature, the dissolutions to serve the Lord while he is asleep. 38. What are the truths regarding the living entities and the supreme personality of Godhead? What are their identities? What are the specific values in the knowledge in the Vedas? And what are the necessities for the spiritual master and his disciples?
Thank you. So basically what he's asking is, that how can Lord be dissatisfied by various varna and ashram? Varnashram acharyavat pumsa paranapaman Vishnu ranadete pantha na anyat tattos karanam. So the purpose of varnashram is to satisfy Vishnu. So how can he be satisfied? Then he glorifies him and he tells that those people who are on the position of spiritual master, they're very merciful to the disciples, sons, etc. So I have taken your shelter. Please give this knowledge to me. Then tell me about different type of pralay, dissolution, and what happens when pralay is there. Then about the truths regarding living entities and the Supreme Personality of Godhead. What are their real identities? And different values of different knowledge in the Vedas. Like there is Kam Shastras, Dharma Shastras, Arth Shastras, Gyan Shastras. Then there are Bhakti Shastras. So what are their values, each one of them? And what is the necessity for the spiritual master and his disciple? Why we have to accept a spiritual master and a spiritual master has to accept a disciple? So please answer all these questions. So this ends our this section. So we'll continue with text 39 tomorrow at 10 a.m. पंद्रह श्रीमद् भागवतम की श्रीकोपात की वांछकल्पद्रुवस्य कृपा सिंधु पतितनां पावनेभ्यो वैष्णवेभ्यो नमः। हरे कृष्ण। श्रीकोपात की